Hello, welcome back. So, in the last session, we have discussed about deadlocks. What are deadlocks? And what are the necessary conditions that may create a chance for a deadlock? And also, how this resource allocation graph can be used for representing a deadlock. So, before entering to this session, please ensure that you have gone through those two video lectures. And this session mainly concentrates on how the deadlocks are handled by different systems. Obviously, different systems use different methods, and this session mainly concentrates on one of the methods, that is deadlock prevention. As we have seen in the last lecture, in general we can deal with the deadlock problem in three different ways, right? Either we can use some protocol to prevent or avoid deadlocks, ensuring that the system will never enter deadlock. So two different methods are the prevention and avoidance. In case of prevention, what we are doing is, as we have seen in the last session, four different conditions are there that should occur simultaneously for a deadlock. So if any one of those conditions are violated, definitely there won't be any deadlock. So that is the first method, denying one of the necessary conditions for a deadlock. And in the case of deadlock avoidance, the system will collect additional information about different allocations, like the maximum number of instances of each resource types and how many of them is already allocated to different processes, and what are the maximum need of resource instances by different processes. All this information will be collected in advance, and based on this, whenever a new request arrives, the system will just calculate if this request is granted, will the system enter deadlock state? And based on this, that is, if the request is safe, that is, it won't create a deadlock, that request will be granted, otherwise, the corresponding request will be denied. This is how the system will tackle with the deadlock in case of deadlock avoidance. And obviously, if these two protocols are not followed in the system, definitely there may be deadlock. And the third method is that just allow the system to enter into a deadlock and later, using some algorithm, detect that there is deadlock and using some other algorithm, recover from the deadlock. And the third method is that just ignore the problem and pretend that the deadlocks will never occur in the system. So obviously now it's the duty of the application programmer to write application program to tackle with the deadlocks. And most systems like Unix and Windows use these types of deadlock handling method. Definitely, expense is the important consideration for ignoring possibility of deadlock. That is, ignoring the possibility of deadlock is always cheaper than other approaches. Since many of the systems the deadlock occur infrequently, maybe just once per year, the extra effort of other methods may not seem worthwhile. That is why most of the system adopt this ignoring deadlock as a tackling method. Now let us see in detail how the deadlock can be prevented. As you know, the deadlock prevention is done by violating any of the four necessary conditions for a deadlock. Four conditions are mutual exclusion, Holden wait, no preemption, and circular wait, right? Let us try to violate these conditions one by one. First of all, mutual exclusion. What do you mean by mutual exclusion? That is, some resources are non-shareable and these resources can be accessed and manipulated by only one process at a time. Okay, so if all the resources in a system are shareable, then there is no problem of deadlock. So if we change all the resources into shareable mode, we can just prevent deadlock. So we can see some example for non-shareable resources. Printer is an example for a non-shareable resource. Read and write file is an example for a non-shareable resource. CPU cycles is an example for a non-shareable resource. So can we change these types of resources, these type of mutually exclusive resources into a shareable one? Never, right? So denying this condition, that is preventing deadlock by denying the mutual exclusion condition, is not practically feasible most of the time because some of the resources are intrinsically non-shareable. We cannot change its nature. So we have to go for the other three conditions to be violated to prevent the deadlock. So let us go for the second condition. We have to violate the second condition, that is hold and wait. What do you mean by hold and wait? There should be some processes which is waiting for some resources, holding some other resources in hand. Okay, if we want, so we have to violate this condition. If we want to violate this condition, we must guarantee that whenever a process requests a resource, it does not hold any other resource. How will you implement this? Different protocols are there. We can see one by one. The first protocol insists that a process should acquire all its resources before it actually begins its execution. That is, in between its execution, it cannot request for a new resource. So definitely the system calls for allocation of resources should precede all other system calls. This is the first type of protocol. And the second one is that during the execution of a process, it can acquire a resource, but only when it has none. That is, if the process want to request for a new resource during its execution, it should release all the resources in hand, and again start requesting for all the resources it requires. This is the second protocol. Both these protocols results in low resource utilization and sometimes starvation also. We can see example for this type of protocols. Okay. Suppose we have a process that copies data from a DVD drive to a file on a disk, then store the files on the disk and then print the results to a printer. So we need three different resources, right? A DVD drive is needed first, then a disk file, okay, then after finally we need a printer also. If we are using the first protocol, what happens is we have to request all the three resources initially before starting execution. That means the process holds the printer for an entire execution time, even if it is needed only at the end of the execution. Whereas if we are using the second protocol, initially we require only the DVD drive and disk file. So the process will copy the contents from DVD drive into disk file by requesting these two resources first, and after that it will release both resources, DVD drive and disk file. Again it will request for disk file and printer. Okay, this is how it proceeds in case of protocol 2. Now let us try to deny the third condition. What is the third condition? No preemption, right? What do you mean by no preemption? That resources cannot be preempted or taken away forcefully from a process. We have to wait until it voluntarily releases those resources after completing the entire process. This is the term no preemption indicates. So how will you deny this condition? Two protocols are there for denying this condition. First protocol is that if a process that is holding some resources requests another resource that cannot be immediately allocated to it, then obviously this process have to wait, right? Then simply waiting is not enough. All its resources currently being held are released. Okay, this is the first protocol. What happened to these released resources? Those preempted resources are added to the list of resources for which the process is waiting. Okay. Now let us try to violate the fourth condition, that is circular wait. What is circular wait? There will be a circular chain of waiting processes, right? P0, P1 up to etc. Pn, right? That means P0 is waiting for a resource held by P1, P1 is waiting for a resource held by P2, like that, and Pn is waiting for a resource held by P0. So it creates a circular chain. How to break this chain? For this we are using a rule that we are imposing a total ordering of all the resource types and require that each process requests resources in an increasing order of enumeration. We can see it in detail. Okay, suppose the resource type, the set of all the resource types is denoted by R, which is equal to R1, R2, etc. Rn. Each Ri is a resource type. Okay, we will define a function f from R to n, where n is a set of natural numbers. That is, we are assigning a unique natural number to each resource type. And we will impose a condition that the process can request for resources only in an increasing order of enumeration. We can see an example for that. Okay, suppose the set of resource types are in our system includes tape drives, disk drives, and printers. And the function we chosen as is as like this. Number for tape drive is 1, and number for disk drive is 5, and number for printer is 12. Okay, so if the total ordering is followed, circular chain will never happen, right? Why? Now let us confirm it. Okay, suppose we have two different processes, P1 and P2. Okay, P1 require tape drive first, then the printer. Like that, P2 require the printer first, then the tape drive. Okay, in normal case, what happens is P1 will request first for the tape drive, and meanwhile P2 requests for the printer. They will both allocated, right? And after that, they will mutually wait, right? A circular chain will be there, right? So how will you break this chain? The solution is using this total ordering. So what we are doing here is that since the tape drive number is 1 and printer number is 12, nobody can request for printer before any other one like tape drive or disk drive, right? So P2 can do any of the following. P2 can never request first the printer then the tape drive, right? So it can do these two things. Either first request the printer, use it, then release the printer, then request for tape drive followed by printer if needed. Or else request for tape drive first, then printer. So whatever may be the case, the mutual waiting or the circular chain will be broken. So this is how we can prevent deadlock using the circular wait denial. Okay, thank you.